I'm with Karl Southern. We're here at Speakeasy in Haslingden at Casson's Accountants. So welcome back, Karl.
Thank you.
We were having a conversation the other day about your journey through Speakeasy, which has been some time now. You were the very first one we ever did.
True. Yes.
So what's changed for you during that time? What have you gleaned from the process?
It took me a while actually in the early sessions. So first couple of sessions I was thinking it was all about the technique, and everything was about the technique. And I think by the third session I finally twigged that it was actually much more important than that. So it became more about what you were saying, not how you were saying it. How you were saying it's important, but the story was the centre to it. And so there was quite a spin and a change for me there.
So it's not just about the style, there's got to be some substance as well.
Absolutely.
So it's made you reflect on the message and maybe the outcome that you're looking for when you give a presentation.
Yeah, and also when you're listening to presentations, it's interesting to see what range of emotions you go through. You know, from fairly passive to actively involved, and everything in between.
Or very often bored.
There's a whole series of presentations I've been to in the last couple of weeks with work that I could tell you about where boredom was a key factor. And I think that's why the storytelling is so important. Presentation that I attended last week on behalf of another company, and I asked the guy afterwards why there was so much text on the slide, and his answer was that he'd been told there were too many slides, so he had to reduce it from 20 to 10, but unfortunately nobody told him to actually truncate the text as well, so all he'd done is double it up.
So same content but fewer slides. Okay.
And it was measured in slides, so he was happy.
I often find, I don't know whether you find this, that it's the fault of the questioner who asks somebody to present, because they say, could you do a presentation on X, Y and Z? And then the first question that comes back is, well, how long do I need to do?
Indeed so. And then,
30 minutes. And then you're thinking...
Well, I think what happens then is that people go into what they've done before, and even worse if they've got their own deck, which is a pet hate of mine. So the deck comes out and you think, well, if I'm doing 30 minutes, I may need 15, 20, 25 slides for that, and you pull out what you need to fill in the time.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So it's not bespoke to the occasion, but it's also a sense of having time to fill with content, and maybe this perception that, well, I've got to shove a lot of stuff in to give them value for money. And
also, when you're padding out 30 minutes with 25 minutes of slide, there's no time left to actually interact with the people you're talking to. I'm sure everybody's been familiar with turning up there and giving the presentation and not actually having spoken with anybody you've given the presentation to. There's been no interaction at all.
Yes. So, and that time when you've got before a presentation is so valuable, isn't it?
Completely.
The ability to kind of weigh up the audience and have some conversations.
Very much so, and I think deliberately you should, if you're giving a presentation and if you've got the opportunity, get there as early as you can, so you've got some time to chat beforehand.
Yes.
You'll also get a much better idea of what they're expecting, having spoken to them casually beforehand, than turning up cold, smack on the hour and getting ready to start.
Now, you told me that at the start, when you began with Speakeasy, and you were at our very first event, weren't you, in what was it, January or February 2010?
That's right.
You thought that it was mostly going to be about presenting technique.
Yes.
But you've kind of changed your view a little bit.
I have. I thought, for me, the technique was always more important in many ways than the message, because the technique was much easier to master, if I'm being honest. And so I've had my share of boring people to death as well in the past. And so realising that it wasn't just about technique, but also trying to get people emotionally involved in what you're talking about, that transformation was kind of key to me. The technique's important, but actually it's of secondary importance to the message you're trying to convey.
Because there's a saying, isn't there, that nobody will come and listen to you if you're a good orator. It's if you've got something to say.
It's
that's worth listening to.
It is.
It's not style over substance. There needs to be some substance there.
It's true. I think we all know there are many good orators about, and many of them appear on television and will spout about their favourite topics. But actually, how much of that do you take to heart? It's almost throwaway. Oh, that was fantastic. It was very, very witty, but actually said nothing.
Yeah. This idea as well of the journey we talk about in a presentation, moving your audience to a different place. How do you perceive that? The change that you're hoping to make in an audience.
I think that I want them to be emotionally with me, to actually share my emotions of whatever it is I'm talking about. And sometimes that can be quite tough. Some of the topics you get asked to talk about, in terms of, in my case, software. It's hard to get emotional about software. I'm geeky, so I find it quite easy. Sometimes that rubs off, and people kind of buy into the enthusiasm and everything else. But I think if they can't share what you feel about it, you're kind of fighting a losing battle anyway. And actually, the little nuances, nobody cares if you fluff your lines on a slide, unless of course you've been dull, in which case it becomes really important that you fluff, because people just, they're already against you, let's be fair. So I think it's you try and carry them through, and if they like you, they'll forgive you anything.
But I mean, an audience, really, they're looking for value, aren't they? They're looking for some insight or something that you can give them that they haven't had before. It's not so much the polish presentation that they're after, it's they want some value from being there.
I think they do. I think the first thing they want, actually, if they're told it's going to be a PowerPoint presentation, is they want to make sure they're not going to be bored to death, however long you're there. If that becomes obvious within the first couple of minutes that they're not going to be bored to death, then I think they do buy in a little bit at least. But they do. If they're willing to invest 30 minutes of their time, I have to make it worth their while.
And this, just finally on this sort of topic of storytelling, we talk about stories a lot in Speakeasy. How do you perceive the value or importance of storytelling in business?
Well, it's like anything else. You ask a child about stories, they remember them. And we're kind of built that way. We're wired to remember stories more than anything else. And so it's a bit like imagery as well, I suppose. You kind of just they prick a memory or something, and storytelling's very the same, pretty much the same. We've all been there. You hear an anecdote and then you can't stop telling it for a couple of weeks. Every time it comes up, it reminds me of a story I heard the other day, and it just flows. And I think it relaxes people as well, rather than a dry, very, very technical presentation. It's just,
Of course, storytelling isn't easy. And it seems that a lot of people don't quite understand how to recognise some material that could constitute a good story, and they also struggle sometimes to convey it.
I think part of that is we undervalue our own collateral that we carry around with us. Our everyday stories. Most people, when they've been working in any form of business, will have anecdotes, will have stories, and most importantly, I suppose, case studies. They may not call them case studies,
yes,
but we've all got examples of where we've done something to help another firm, typically.
Sure.
And it's actually recognising that and actually saying, well, okay, what are the key elements I need to take out of that experience and putting that into the story.